Okay, thanks everyone, and let me put my glasses on if I can. I'm sure you've heard from Commissioner Bettman already what transpired as he saw it from the meetings today. Let me try and give you just a little bit of background and let you know how we see it. First of all, I just want to go back a little bit because I understand that we have a lot of people here that haven't been covering this particular matter on an ongoing basis. There was a season-ending lockout that was imposed some 8 years ago. That lockout resulted at the end of it in the players agreeing to a 24% reduction in their salaries after having lost an entire year. And in addition to that, they secured some very small concessions from the owners in that regard, essentially that they would get improved player contracting rights, salary arbitration, free agency, and the like. The magnitude of the concessions the players made, we estimate, are about $3.3 billion over the life of the last agreement. In other words, the players were paid about $3.3 billion less over the term of the last agreement than they would have had the prior rules remained in place. At the same time, the NHL experienced record revenues every year, with the biggest 2 years in percentage increase, and I believe in dollar terms, being last year and the year before. I forget which was which, but one was at 9-something% and one was at 10-something%. So one would think, looking in from the outside, that all was well. So what proposal against that backdrop and against that history did the owners make? Their initial proposal was, let's have another 24% less. And then a little while later, it was 17.5% less. And the most current offer, if one can call it that, most current proposal, which came in the last few days, was to reduce player salaries only 12.3% against that background. And questions I get asked from the players are, is that fair? How could that be fair? How could that be balanced? What do we get out of this deal? We estimate that over the 6 years of the proposed agreement that the owners have put in front of us, this would result in players' salaries being lowered, depending on what growth rate you assume. At the owner's proposed growth rate of 5%, it's about $1.65 billion. We think the game's likely to grow at the rate it has the last several years, which is a little over 7%, and that would bring it to nearly, not quite, but nearly $1.8 billion. It's not hard to figure out why the owners would think that would be a good deal. It's pretty hard to figure out why, given the concessions last time and the promises that everything was fixed, and the record revenues, that we should face it again. When you look at this, the owner's proposal, of course, contemplates much more than that level of reduction. The rules related to free agency would be modified in the direction of the owners and against the players. The rules related to restricted free agency, the same. Salary arbitration, the same. Length of contract, the same. How the individual contracts are counted on the cap, the same. So in other words, the things players got from the last round of concessions, the owners now want, in significant part, to take away. And I would just ask you to contemplate, you've all been covering this dispute for a long time, and those of you that haven't can look, on the web and see what they've said. what is the articulated reason that they want this, other than that the basketball owners got a deal they like better than the current hockey deal, and that the football owners got a deal they like better than the current hockey deal? We pointed out that we'd be willing to take the baseball deal with no cap, but we were told that doesn't count because baseball's not a cap sport. We're supposed to pretend it doesn't exist. So against this backdrop, what did the players do? The players offered to make real concessions in terms of reducing their share out of HRR, and to do so in a fashion which they thought would be fair under the circumstances and would give them some small degree of protection. One of the things that the players have said is that, measured against the backdrop of the concessions made the last time and the record revenues, they don't see any reason in absolute dollar terms to go backwards, to take less. In the owner's last proposal, there was a make-whole provision, self-styled, meaning that that's the label they put on it, at the end. And what it said was, first part of the paragraph, which was good to read, was that in the event that the players lost salary this year under their new proposal below what they were paid last year, that difference would in some fashion be deferred and paid to them at a later time. And then we read the last half of it. And the last half of it said, except that the way it would be paid would be that the salaries of the players in future years would be reduced even more in order to make that payment. So the players being made whole would be made whole by other players, not by the owners. I even had one player say to me, so let me get this straight. If I play the next 3 years, then I'm going to lose salary in year 3, and it's going to be used to pay me salary in year 1. And the answer is yes. So there's no protection here that would be meaningful. And when you say make whole, it's a phrase that I would not have used to describe that kind of provision. Nevertheless, the players want to make an agreement. They always have. Otherwise, they never would have proposed the concessions that they already have done so, and that they wouldn't have left them on the table. And we made 3 proposals today, or rather, we gave them 3 alternative ways to look at this. And I want to describe them briefly for you. In proposal number 1, we would start out with a fixed player share. It would just be a number we would negotiate for this year and each of the next 2 years. And then, if revenues had not reached the point where that was 50%, that share was frozen for the remaining 3 years of the agreement. If the industry grows at 5%, which is what the owners say it'll grow at, they reach 50% in the 5th year. And it goes down on a fairly regular decline from a little over 55 to 50. If the industry grows at 7.2%, which is what it has, they reach 50.6% in year 3. So the suggestion that somehow the players are not moving in the owner's direction strikes me as being fundamentally misplaced. Now, I want to be clear, there are provisions in there that if the industry in fact grows faster than the owners say it's going to grow, that the players get a slightly bigger share, but only of that excess growth. The second option we gave them was to say, let's use your 5% number, 5% growth number. And the players would take, instead of a 57% share of increased HRR, which is what the existing agreement would provide, a 24.7% share. 3/4 of it would then go to the owners. And that would be true for 5 years. At the end of the 5th year, they're at 50% at only 5% growth. They're down to a little over 51 in the 4th year, a little over 52 in the 3rd year. At 7.2%, they're down under 51 by year 3. So we said, here's 2 avenues that you can look at, in which the players are prepared to get down in a reasonable amount of time, given what happened, to percentages which look like yours. Not all at once, and not with big salary concessions. Not given what happened the last time, and not given the growth that we've had. And then we had a third approach, and we haven't been able to run the numbers yet. Sometimes you come up with ideas reasonably soon before bargaining meetings. And we did float it today. And it's pretty simple. And it's pretty direct. The owners want 50-50, which reduces the player's share by 12.28%, or about 13% on salaries after you take benefits out. And the players think it's only fair that they ought to honor all the contracts they've signed up until now, including a whole bunch that were signed over the last few months. So the suggestion is we'll move to 50-50 as long as you agree to honor the contracts you signed. It's pretty straightforward. Most people would like to believe that when they sign a contract with somebody that it will be paid attention to. So the suggestion we made was, since on 50-50 immediately the player's share would fall about 13% on an individual contract, we segregate 13%, and the players get paid the 13%. The other 87%, plus all the new contracts, go into a pool with HRR, and that's 50-50, and it starts right now. It's a very simple proposition. We'll get you to 50-50, but you got to agree to honor the contracts that you just signed. We think it makes a lot of sense. We think it really is fair. It couldn't be more balanced in that regard. What it doesn't do is give the owners an agreement right now to have the players give them back billions of dollars. But, just so you know, on the first option we gave them, we think the owner's savings from the current agreement over 5 years at the lower growth rate is about $854 million, and about $1.059 billion at the higher growth rate, if that's what the industry has. Excuse me, that was the second option I gave you. First option, the numbers are a little different. It's $796 million at 5% growth, and $1.117 billion at higher growth rates. Now, they may think that's nothing. Most people would think $1 billion is a lot of money. I do. Players do. My guess is most of you watching me now and that are going to read the newspaper columns and watch this on TV would think it's a lot of money. Apparently they don't. And the reason I say apparently they don't is that after the proposal was made, they did what they've done before. They take a very few minutes. They don't think about it very much. They don't analyze it. They don't talk to the other owners. They don't do anything. They take less than 10 minutes. Maybe it was 15, and we have a meeting. And we are told 2 things. All 3 proposals are rejected in their entirety. And secondly, the proposal that we recently got, I gave you the numbers on that before, is their best offer. And they might be willing to tweak it around the edges. I said a tweak is sort of a small and insubstantial thing, and they agreed. But that's it. And that's what we're supposed to do. And when you think about it, if you assume that's their best offer, why in the world did we see it 4 weeks into a lockout? Why didn't we see it on September 14th or August the 10th or July 13th or whenever it was that they made their proposal for the 24% rollback? I can't answer that question. Wish I could, but I don't know what the answer is. So where we are is that they've told us what they've told us. We will report to the players, as we always do, and we will go from there. We're available to continue negotiating. We're going to have to continue negotiating, whether it's tomorrow or the next day or next week or whenever it is, until eventually an opportunity arises to make an agreement. But today is not a good day. It should have been, but it wasn't. I can take questions for a few minutes. I don't have an unlimited amount of time because I've got a call with players starting fairly soon. Yes?
Don, why did you elect to go with 3 alternatives today rather than just picking one of them and going forward with that?
Question was, why did we go with 3 alternatives today instead of just picking one of them? The answer is really simple. It is to say, we'd like to make a deal with you. We think there's 3 alternatives, and we hope we can live with any one of them if it provides the right kind of negotiating framework. So pick one. That's what we did.
Was there any chance of a 4th possible offer that was supposed to be given to the NHL today?
Was there? Oh, we've discussed any number of additional alternatives over time, but these were the 3 that were settled on.
Yes. Don, would you consider the 3rd proposal the closest thing to working off their framework, honoring contracts and going 50-50?
It is in the sense that if they would agree to do that and segregate on the existing contracts those dollars, you could get to 50-50 on the remaining issues faster. Oh, sure. In that sense it is. Beyond that, you'd have to look at it in the beginning. But I want to remind you what's also in their framework. Free agency takes a lot longer. Don't have salary arbitration as often. Restricted free agency is less valuable. You can't have a contract of longer than 5 years, notwithstanding all the owners that sign players to contracts much longer than 5 years this summer, including some that were in the room today. So, you know, there's a lot of other things that would have to go with it.
Don, you say that they've said they're open to tweaking their offer. Why don't you work on their framework, but offer like a variation of your own where you offer far more than a tweak? At least then you're speaking the same language.
I don't know what we will eventually do. I don't know what the owners will eventually do. But if you had been in the room, the vibe you would have gotten is, unless you're prepared to sign with very minor variations, don't bother us.
Don, what did you think of the league's decision to publish their last offer in full?
They're entitled to do that. It's entirely up to them. I got no comment on it one way or another. That's, you know, it's entirely their judgment about it.
So what happens now? Do you just wait for a new offer, or will you present something new?
What happens now is, first of all, on our side, we communicate with the rest of the membership. Obviously, we will communicate with their agents too, because they speak with their agents. We'll let them know what the circumstances are. We'll do that for as long as it takes, and then we'll go back to work and see if we can figure out something else that matters. And I hope and assume that the owners are doing the same thing. Now, you know, this late blooming 50-50 offer sort of looks like what happened in some other negotiations recently. You know, so I'm not sure what it means, but we will see. That we meet and talk about some of the things on their revenue sharing proposal, which were not clear. And I don't mean clear in the sense I think of being intentionally muddled. I just mean they were described in only a very cursory way, and we have to talk those through before we can respond on that. In addition, we have to talk to them about the HRR clarifications. They would like to clarify the definitions, and as far as I know, there are some issues which involve not insubstantial amounts of money on which we don't have an agreement. So that has to be done too. We'll have to see.
For all the years you've been through this
super surprised. Is anything honestly surprised you in all the years in baseball?
What did I say I was surprised about? Okay, I didn't think I had. That's why I asked. Yeah.
What was different from what the NHL? Does anyone surprise you?
Look, I've been around this block long enough to know that anything can happen in bargaining, that when somebody takes a hard stand like the owners have taken, you have to assume they mean it, and you go from there. It doesn't mean you make an agreement which is not in the interests or consistent with the desires of the players, and you go from there. You know, I had hoped, you know, that the approaches we've taken today would put us within range. So far, apparently, it's not true.
All three proposals mostly dealing with the player share and core economic. It didn't have the...
Yes. And we deliberately said this is what we wanted to give them today. We'd be prepared to talk about the other ones as soon as they're ready to.
If that offer that they made Tuesday isn't acceptable now, why would it have made a difference if it was offered in July?
Now, that wasn't the point. I don't think it would have been accepted in July. All I'm saying is that if you are negotiating to try and save the season and go on with your business, and you have a best offer, you would think you would want to get it out there before a month into a shutdown. Sorry.
You're saying that they waited 4 weeks into the lockout to put an offer forward. Could you not have put an offer forward?
If we had been in position to do this ahead of time, we would have.
I just want to clarify what you said about not jumping on the other. I wanted to know the general reaction of the 5-year contract maximum, or did you really not even?
That was not discussed today. It was not discussed today. The general reaction, you know, is pretty simple. It's an artificial limitation. It's another artificial limitation on a player's ability to contract. We already have the overall cap. We already have the share. We already have the team caps. We already have the limitations on how contracts can be structured. And this would be just another one, and it's another one which works against the players. And interestingly enough, it's exactly contrary to what all kinds of clubs were doing all summer, including teams owned by owners who are at the bargaining table.
What's your reading on when these guys are going to be playing hockey again?
I don't know, and when I figure that out, I think I'll tell them first, if that's all right. I hope it's very soon. You know, I hope it's very soon. The history of labor relations is that you never know when a break's going to come, and sometimes it doesn't come for a while, and sometimes it doesn't come suddenly. You just got to work at it every day.
We saw the league go public with their proposal. Do you guys go public with 2 or 3 proposals in line?
We haven't thought about that yet beyond what I'm saying here. The first thing we're going to do is talk to the players, and then we'll make a judgment about that after that. As I said before, they can go public or not go public. It's entirely up to them, and it's not for me to say.
How important is it for the membership to have an 82-game schedule?
I'm sorry, say that again?
How important is it for the membership to have an 82-game schedule?
Look, it's really, I come at it from a very simple proposition. Everybody would like an 82-game schedule. It's better for the business. It's better for the game. It provides a more equitable and a tried and true way to determine which teams get into the playoffs and all the rest of it. So it has importance in and of itself that should not be ignored. Nobody questions that. You know, the question is, does that overcome problems that are there with a contract that the players don't believe is fair, don't believe is balanced, and don't believe is in their interest?
Do they reject the explanation, or did they just simply reject it?
They said they rejected it, that they told us before that this was their best offer, that we could tweak around the edges, but that was all. And with a suggestion that they would look again at the make-whole provision if we would sign on the dotted line for everything else that's in there. But nothing specific on that. So there wasn't an opportunity to have the kind of the discussion you just asked me about. All right, I got time for maybe one more before I go upstairs. This side's been underrepresented. Yeah.
Example of something they're trying to do regarding HR that does have a price tag?
Well, just for example, we have questions about the subsidies that municipalities pay teams, whether they call them arena agreements or anything else. And we almost had an arbitration hearing a couple of years ago over the Glendale subsidy. which is a direct subsidy for failure to sell tickets and all the rest of it. That's many millions of dollars a year. That's one of the things that I understand has not been agreed to and resolved going forward. And of course, it would cover any other situation like that. So that's one of the things that we have to resolve. If in fact, when the staffs get together, we find out that the differences are less than they have been in these discussions, that'd be great. But as far as I know, those issues have not been agreed upon as of now.
What the owner's offer allows you to agree mutually, that phrase they have.
Well, what it says is their offer is contingent upon an agreement by us and them on the clarifications. And I'm not knocking them for that. That's how you would normally condition an agreement. But we don't have, so far as I know, that agreement. Okay? Thanks, everyone.